Hi guys, welcome to Python tutorial 4b, variables and data types. In tutorial 4a, we learned about the fundamental differences between variables in C, C++, Java versus Python. The URL for Python code used for this tutorial is shared in the description below. As I mentioned earlier, variables are nothing but memory location to store values which can be used and updated during the runtime of the program. Here in this example, I have four variables which store values of most commonly used data types. The first variable, Python is cool, is taking a boolean variable true. The second variable, age, is storing an integer value 25. The third variable, height, is taking a float value 1.81, whereas the last variable, first name, is storing my name, which is a string value. We have already seen integer, float, and string data types in the previous tutorials. Boolean data type is something new for us. In the next few slides, let us see each of these data types in detail with examples. Boolean is a two-constant object, either true or false. In Python, it is represented as bool in short. In numeric context, they behave like the integers 0 and 1. 0 stands for false and 1 stands for true. Over here, in the example on the right, you see some things which may not make sense at the beginning. If you ask a Python whether 10 is greater than 20, Python will say false. Likewise, if you ask the question whether 5 is not equal to 10, Python will reply us with true. Let us see it in action. Let's ask Python few questions. At first, I'm going to ask whether 5 is greater than 10. Python says false. How about 5 less than 10? It says true. Now I'm going to ask it whether 5 is not equal to 10. True, since 5 is not equal to 10. Let me ask it a different question. I want to know whether this letter is inside this word spam. True. How about this? I want to know whether this letter is inside the beetle. Python replies me with false. Let's see integer data types. Integer is nothing but whole numbers. In Python, it is known as int in short. As you see on the right side, all these numbers fall under the integer data type. Yet, you may wonder what are these values in the last two rows, as they are like 0x, and you may think like 0x is not an integer. Don't worry, they are nothing but hexadecimal numbers, which is a different way of representing integers. Most of the time we won't be using hexadecimal numbers, so we don't have to worry about it. Floats. Without float, life would be very boring in Python. Float can take all those decimal numbers which normally integers could not handle, like pi, square root of 2, 3 over 2 which is 1.5, e power 1 which is 2.718, dot dot dot. Simply put, any number which has a decimal value will be stored as float. Again, you may wonder in this example, what are these two values in the last two rows? Simply, they are alternative way of representing the float values, which are very big in size. 32.3 E18 should be read as 32.3 times 10 raised to the power of 18. Let us see it in the REPL. I want to get the integer value of 32.3 E18. You see the trailing zeros? How about this? Minus 70.2 E12. You can use either small e or capital E. Ooh. Strings. We have already discussed the basics of strings in the previous tutorial, that string is a set of characters or symbols enclosed inside single or double quotes. In Python, it is known as str in short. Let us go through the few examples on the right side. This is obviously a string. This should also be a string. Hey wait, isn't this 1, 2, 3 an integer data? What do you think? Let's recall the definition of a string. String is a set of characters or symbols inside single or double quotes. The numbers 1, 2, 3 can also be treated as a character. And as long as there is a single quote or double quote, the term should be considered as a string. Python will treat it as a string. The same goes for this decimal value. Though you may think that it's a float data type, since it's enclosed in a double quote, you should treat it as a string. Let's have a quick quiz. Can you identify what these data types are? Let me give you a hint. There are three strings, two boolean values, two integers, and two floats here. If you guys have any doubts, you may post it in the comment section, which we can discuss later. There are many other data types in Python, such as list, dictionary, tuple, and a lot more, which we will see in the future. Some of these are very powerful, with which you can create a lot of cool stuff. Let's move on to the REPL to make some real programs. Here, I have created 12 variables and I'm printing their values on the console. The first variable, Python is cool, is a boolean data type. The second variable, age, is an integer. The third variable, height, is a float which contains a decimal value, whereas the rest of the variables are containing string data types. By now you should know how to print the values and variables on the screen, right? In case if you have forgot, we have to use a print function followed by an open bracket and a closed bracket, and put the variable names or the values that we want to print inside those brackets. Let me run them. As you see here on the right side, I'm printing all the variables that I have created. We learn how to print variables and values. Now let us see how to combine strings. Why do we need to combine string? As humans, it will be more meaningful for us to read a complete sentence in the output screen rather than simply reading the variable or the value. Apart from that, combining string has many use cases which we will explore later. To combine a string, we have to use the plus symbol. You may ask, isn't the plus sign is for adding numbers? Yes, you are absolutely correct. Python uses the same sign for both adding numbers and combining strings. In fact, it is smart enough that when it sees two numbers, it will add, and when it sees two strings, it will combine them. As you can see from the output here at the bottom, the string my first name is gets combined with the value in the variable first name followed by a full stop. And in the second print statement, have you noticed that I'm using a space before and start of the and the reason goes like this. When we combine strings, Python will not give space between words by itself. So we have to tell it where to add space explicitly. Let us see it in REPL on how to combine strings. As I said earlier, you have to use plus sign to combine two strings, and to combine more strings, it's the same, you use plus sign everywhere. And since Python doesn't implicitly add a space between combining strings, we have to explicitly tell Python where to add the space, like what I have did in this line 20. Let me run the program and see the result. So as you see on the console, it's nicely printing the strings which is combined. Now we know how to combine strings. It's time for us to change values from one data type to another. You may be wondering why the hell we should learn how to convert values and variables from one data type to another. Let me give you a scenario. Let us say you have two numbers, 1.82 and 4 as a string, since it's enclosed inside double quotes. If you want to add those numbers and find their sum, you should and must convert them into float in the first place before performing the addition. If not, as we've seen in earlier examples, Python will simply combine those as strings. So if you don't tell the Python to convert it into float, it will think that these two are string and we are performing string combination, just simply adding the 4 to the end of the string 1.82 and producing a new string 1.824. So you have to explicitly tell the Python to convert them into float by typing float followed by the value to be converted. This way, Python will convert these two numbers into float and then performs arithmetic addition. Here are some of the do's for typecasting, which is changing the data types. Mostly, any data can be easily converted into a string, as you can see from the first two example. String can be converted into integer, as well float value can be converted into integer. And for the floats, it can take in integer, string which is an integer, as well as string which is a float. Some of the red flags for typecasting is shown here. If you are converting a value to an integer or a float, we should normally pay more attention. If we do it wrongly, Python will throw us different error messages based on the type of error we made. Over here, I'm trying to convert a string which is not an integer into an integer. So Python is telling me that it could not be performed. Likewise, I'm trying to convert this word 10 into an integer, which obviously doesn't make any sense to Python. And I have typed some rubbish and I was trying to convert to float, and Python is telling that it could not convert the string into a float. Another commonly made mistake by beginners, including me when I first started Python, is when they combine string with other data type, they will fail to convert everything into string before combining them together. Like if you see in this first print statement, before combining this my age is string with this variable age, I'm converting this age data type from integer into string. Hence, it gets printed nicely. Whereas in the next print statement, I'm trying to combine this string without converting this integer into a string. And as we discussed earlier, Python is telling me that there is a type error since everything must be string and not integer. I have a few example code here in REPL to demonstrate how to combine string with other data types. So if you see for the first print statement, the first name variable itself is a string. So there is no need to convert it into string explicitly. Whereas for the second print statement, the age is 25. So it should be converted into string. Likewise, for the third print statement, the height is again a decimal value. So it had to be explicitly converted into string. To see the results, just click run, and as you see here, the values are nicely printed without any error. The type function takes one input, which could be some value or variable, and then it will give us a data type of that object. In Python, it's known as type in short. This is one of the very useful feature in Python, which we will appreciate when we build big programs and complex projects. As you see in the example, when I ask a Python what is the type of this value 1, it's replying me as integer. Whereas when I ask what is the value, or I mean the type of 1.0, it tells me it's a float. And when I ask it what is the type of this value 1 enclosed in quotes, it replies me that it's a string. Likewise, when I ask what is the type of this value true, it tells me it's a boolean. Let us see an example now in REPL. Over here, I'm asking Python to tell me the type of three variables named first name, height, and favorite movie. Just remember, when we combine strings, we have to make sure all of them is of string data type in the first place. The type function may not give us a string result, so we must convert the result of the type function into a string explicitly before combining them into a string. Let us see the result in the console. The variable name is of string data type, which we know as shown here, whereas the variable height is of float data type since it's a decimal value, and lastly the variable favorite movie, which is Batman the Dark Knight 2000, is also of string data type. With that, we come to the end of this tutorial. Here I have summarized the 4 key concepts covered. We started with commonly used data types, then we went on to combining strings using the plus sign. Later, we learned how to convert or change data from one type to another. And finally, we explored how to find the data types. Thanks guys for watching the video and for the wonderful comments. Let me meet you with another wonderful video soon. Till then, have fun and keep Pythoning.